The rest. Out of 941, 400 goes to homes. Is this the advice you are going to give to Kenyans, that half of your health is a home? Because that's where management of resources and the gauge to how you can run our economy, it starts with you as an individual. You look at the list of the wealth. I don't know whether you came here by walking, because there's no car listed. But according to my knowledge, a car is an asset. And this is a person Kenyans wants to see exercising the highest epitome of financial management. And it starts with what you present to this committee. I want you to clarify, even these shares, piece of agriculture land, how many acres? Investment, financial instrument, what is the shares or dividends? Investments in through family company, 400 million. What is it that is 400 million? Shares in a bank, which bank? Imperial, which one is this bank? So this is how a Kenya is going to gauge of the individual that is going to be at the highest financial management institution. Really, we need to be serious.
Miss, you have made statement. What is your question?
One, whether he owns a car, because not stated there. Two,
but is he obligated to own a car? There are many people who don't own cars.
The statement
The
of
most
assets.
distinguished lawyer called John Hamino doesn't know how to drive, doesn't own cars, but he travels.
I think the professor can just answer what he can on my description. He knows what I'm talking about. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker. Honorable Camino, your friend, doesn't own those kinds of homes also. Those homes require cars.
Naisula, in this batch.
Thank you, Chair. I promise not to weep or be long in this one. So, to the nominee, the number of unemployed youths in Kenya is estimated at 14%, according to the International Labour Organization, and as many as 5.2 million youth adults are unable to find meaningful employment, a pressing concern to policymakers. So my question to you is, how do you intend to turn things around to grow the economy, to specifically secure the millions of jobs that the Kenya Kwanza government promised our youths?
Professor, you can deal with those four.
Thank you, Chairman, and honorable members for those questions. And let me start with the issue of CDF. And I said that I'll be guided by the law, because we have to say the commitments must be made, but of course they must be consistent with the law. Mheshimiwa Junet actually said there have been a finance committee that has also been talking to the treasury. They cannot spend more than they are allowed by the law. So we'll be consistent with the law. That is my answer. I don't know which laws the court ruling is a question of checking on that and saying that are we and we are going to consult also in the relevant organizations of government so that everything is clear. But we cannot fail to honor if the law also permits that. That's my simple answer for that. And thank you very much, Mheshimiwa Murugara. I think I do understand. And we are starting from a very difficult situation. And so when you are in a difficult situation, how do you get out of the difficult situation? His Excellency the President has been using a very nice phrase of, if you find yourself in a hole, stop digging, try to get out. You know. So essentially, there are some short-term issues that we deal with. That's why I started by saying, the current thinking by the government right now, which I buy quite a lot, and I have a lot of discussions with the donors. We were, for example, with the donors who are providing food relief, we argued that we may need concessional borrowing, which will help us remove the very expensive domestic debt. And then once that is done, the fiscal space will start building, and then we can start signaling fiscal consolidation. If the government doesn't have fiscal space, it means that it cannot finance development. That's the main issue, and that is the main spin that we want to make sure that we have. If I had the time, one day I can talk about the crowding out, because it actually affects everyone. So it's something, but how do we resolve it? It's actually coming back to trying to create fiscal flexibility by the government so that it will do that. And if this committee approves me, that is the goal that I will start moving towards, fiscal flexibility, so that we jump into specifics and trying to help out. And thank you, Mheshimiwa Daud. I didn't know that there were 200 vehicles leased out, but again, it's something that I will look at. Let me say this. When the crisis was started biting, and especially the whole world, it's only the US Fed that actually started tightening their monetary policy. And you can see even Euro started being affected because they were not following suit. When everybody followed suit, there was a whole tightening, even in Kenya here. And so the signaling is that there will be scarcity of dollars. So the dollars that you mentioned in terms of deposit, they are owned by individuals. And so everybody moves into a different direction because they are anticipating that there will be tightening. So the whole issue is to say, once the crisis is over, we are going to see dollar flows. The other day I was talking even to several farms, like even tea exporters. They are stockpiling their quantity. The Ukrainian crisis is such that we cannot export the products that we used to export there. We cannot take tea to Pakistan, for example, because of the flood. So there is a bit of a shock in terms of the supply. So we are not getting the dollar flows. But I do believe that it will come through. You have mentioned about the cartels. This is again something I went back to talking about markets. How do we develop markets? How do we regulate markets? How do we protect markets? And why you protect markets is because of the cartels. And you are right. And this is something that I mentioned as a very important second pillar that we are going to deal with. So the situation will be dealt with in that way. Yes, I understand your point about financial management. If you are an investor, you look at what is the appropriate returns at a particular time, and you change over time. What I was required to provide is my net worth given the current situation. Why do people invest in homes? Because they have safe returns. If tomorrow manufacturing sector is better, we will invest there. As an investor, and this, by the way, is a whole congregate of my family and myself, including the cars that we own. We did not break them down. Okay? I came here with a company car, which is an international organization. So essentially, that's why you didn't find specifics. But the most important thing is to tell you that even yourself, you'll wake up tomorrow to invest on the basis of the returns that you see. If the information in the market shows that you're going to get into a loss, you are going to change your investment pattern. So if I observe your investment today, they will be different with the next 10 years to come. And that is the composition. That is what it is all about. Once we create a boom in other sectors of the economy, we'll find everybody flocking into those areas and start earning economic rents from them. Thank you very much for talking about the unemployed youth. And the essence, and I shared, because I talked to, I started with, I raised some of those issues. I talked about
Chairman,
markets because I wanted to make it very clear
Chairman,
that it is
clarification.
Honorable Mr.
Sorry for interruption, but where we need to be very keen is the net worth, because it is a repeated question. Can the professor tell us, in his understanding, what is net worth? And where is his liability in this statement?
I think what I provided was the net worth. I have no liabilities that sorry. I calculate. By the time I move out, I am asked for the net worth. That is what I computed and provided. Yeah. Then I wanted to go back to the youth issue, because the youth issue is very, very important. And I think, Madam, the whole issue, what I talked about the markets is that is the kernel of bottom-up approach.
All the Naisula Lesoda. I feel Honorable Naisula.
Naisula. I didn't write the name. It was so fast. Thank you so much. But the whole idea, look at it this way. We have looked at the youth issue from even the demographic transition, from very, very, very many dimensions. But we do believe, and I strongly believe, and I agree with the government here, and the bottom-up approach is that once we structure the market, once we develop different markets in different segments of the economy, and once we actually protect those markets and govern them well, then it means that you can join in the market and make a living. There will be interventions that may be required for you to participate in that particular market. And that's why everybody is talking about the manifesto for Kenya Kwanza, where we talk about the Hustler Fund. The Hustler Fund is an intervention to help you join in that market. We do believe that most of our youth have a lot of potential, but they need interventions or support to get into those markets. Given that as we move in that direction, I can promise you the demographic dividend will be in sight for us. But the most important thing is to say that those markets where they participate in is where we want to provide interventions, and that is what is going to happen. And the interventions are creating appropriate funds, but also creating appropriate ventures, market signals that are going to help in terms of that market, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. I hope I was brief.
Raso, Honorable Sharia, Emasa, you have already had a bite. Robert Mbui, Ferdinand, Mishi, and Koech. We'll take now more than 4, Professor, so that you answer and respond to all of them. So start with Honorable Raso, Honorable Sharia, Honorable Ferdinand, Honorable Mbui, Honorable Mishi, and Honorable Koech.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Professor, by Kenyan standards, you are a wealthy man. If I go to your pro bono, development of 2 classes at Gathange Primary, 250,000. Develop 2 classrooms at Gacharage Dispensary, 20,000. That adds up to 620,000. If I look at your net wealth, that is 0.006%. What is your philosophy on wealth creation and prosperity sharing? Because you say you represent the hustlers. Finally,
question at a time.
Finally, there is this move in the UK where the new Chancellor advised the Prime Minister on the economics. And it has really caused a big hue and cry in the UK that they say that that government must go. What do you say about the president saying that we must first tax wealth based on actually what you have supplied the committee this morning? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. Professor, we've had one issue that we've been grappling with the National Assembly, is the application of Article 223 by the National Treasury. In your view, what do you think is the remedy available to the legislature in the circumstances where such expenditures do not meet the threshold of a supplementary budget as espoused in the article, the PFM Act and its attendant regulations?
Very good. Ferdinand, one question.
The 2, but I didn't restrict myself to 1. The local blame game, Professor, is that the government wastage and the huge public bills that we see around, and that is actually contributing to the huge recurrent expenditure. In your view, for us to be able to grow, what do we need to do to reduce the current expenditure in the government for the economy to grow? I think let's come up, because I know that that's the local blame game, a huge government wastage. Thank you.
Robert Mbui.
Thank you, Chair. The nominee has severally mentioned the bottom up, and I have heard it being mentioned also and touted as an economic model. And now a proposal to come up with a fund that you are calling the Hustler Fund. Kindly explain very clearly what is the difference between that fund and the Uwezo Fund, which has been in existence without interest, the Youth Enterprise Fund, which exists without interest, Women Enterprise Fund, all those funds. What is the difference between those and the Hustler Fund? And Chair, I want you to look at the Declaration of Wealth form that the nominee has given us. He's indicated in the description of properties that he owns 8 items. The last item, Chair, is shares in a bank, and that part has been left blank. Was it deliberate? Because you've indicated yourself shares in a bank, but you have not put a figure.
The next was Mishi. Sorry, Mishi, I was checking a document.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, away from slashing the 300 billion from the budget, it has been talked that the KRA is going to be pushed to collect around 3 trillion. And some of the option, it is in the name of expanding the tax bracket. My question is, how do you assure Kenyans, the poor Kenyans, those the Kenya Kwanza refer them as hustlers, that they are not going to be the target of the carry in terms of expanding tax bracket? And in the same perspective, how do you intend to resolve tax collection dispute in a humane manner without affecting our revenue targets? In the past, Honorable Chair, tax collection has been politicized in a way that some government officers have been aggressively demanding for taxes from Kenyans without considering their plight and sustainability of their businesses. I thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Honorable Koech.
Mine is on fiscal distress. We gather that the country is in a very bad shape at the moment, that today our credit rating is actually affected. And it is estimated that our total debt constitutes 67.4% of our nominal GDP, which roughly translates to 8.8 trillion. It is also estimated that our debt service now stands at 1 trillion. The cost of interest on our debt is now the single largest expenditure item on the recurrent budget, and it is threatening to paralyze the operations of both levels of government. In your view, Mr. Nominee, what factors have plunged the country into such huge fiscal distress, and what innovative ways will you put in place to deal with this debt? Thank you.
Yes, Professor.
Thank you, Chairman and honorable members. Fantastic questions that come through. Let me try to see how I get them throughout. And let me start with the question that was raised on pro bono. And pro bono is you actually invest your froze. You don't invest. You are trying to support some targeted groups. And I think maybe the figures were not correct, because the 2 classrooms that were done were 2.1 million, and some of them may have been spaced. But what I'm really saying is that I am a private individual, and what I was doing is to use my froze, because you cannot invest through, you cannot disrobe your assets to invest in pro bono. It's in froze on the basis of request and verified request. So that continues, and as long as they are verifiable requests. For me, I was supporting schools because I do believe that, and especially polytechnics, because I do believe that the youth can find their way. So essentially, I don't have a lot of allocation because one of the things I have to do is to educate my children, and I have been doing that. Obviously, you do that. You actually provide pro bono on the basis of the balances that you have. Then you're right about the advice to the government, and obviously different aspects. Let me put it this way. I would like to encourage the KRA to participate in taxing where there is a boom, the sector that is booming, it should also participate. But those taxes should not distort the market. They should not distort the allocation of resources. They should not create incentives to run away from taxes. And those are the principles that we would want to promote. And once we promote that, I'm sure the tax system is going to work very well. And it's also consistent with Mheshimiwa Mishi in terms of saying the poor are not going to be targeted. We are actually going to make sure that the taxation system should make sure that it does not distort the market, does not create incentive for you to run away, but it should create a very efficient way. For example, I talked about the digital platforms. They are going to help us in terms of correcting taxes in a way that doesn't also distort the market structure and even the demand structure of the products in question. For me, that is very, very important. How do we structure that? We structure that in terms of consultation, in terms of how the market is, how the structure of demand in the market, and also how the economic situation is. For example, you saw that during the COVID, there were quite a lot of consideration from so many organizations, including banks, in terms of lowering the effects of the impact of the tax. Application of 223. This is a difficult concept, but it's essentially the whole issue, and I think I borrow also from Mheshimiwa Junet, who said that the Parliamentary Committee on Finance and even Budget, they all observe, they are watching in terms of what is happening. I think the most important thing is to make sure that the expenditures or the functional expenditures are also consistent with the rate down law, and that is going to be very, very important. And this has happened, and the government is trying to swim, the current government, even in its own transition, is trying to swim through it. But what solutions? Every day, when you have a problem, you generate solutions of what should be done. It is now tightening the whole issue of how much, and the Parliament is actually going to be responsible for this, to try to say how much, what flexibility do you have even within the Article 223. You're not changing the law, but you're changing the guidelines. And I do believe that guidelines work well to shape the current constraints, to shape the market consideration, and also to guide us in terms of where we should be. And I do believe that is fantastic. I do agree with you in terms of wastage, Mheshimiwa Ferdinand. But we have to ask ourselves, how do we achieve the best results? We have to start talking about how do we prioritize the areas that we want to target and invest in, and how do we target those areas in terms of what we have done, and finally, how do we monitor and evaluate the results, because they have to be consistent with the results. So we have to create that awareness in terms of the priorities we want to have, and list the priorities. Some of those priorities can be time-bound, and then we want to see whether we have results. Can we evaluate that? And if the totality of the results was to make sure that the economy grows, it is not only going to improve the welfare, but it's also going to improve the tax collection. And that is why I do believe that is extremely important. Mheshimiwa
Speaker, I'm not satisfied with the answer.
Just seek a clarification.
Yeah, because we're talking about the government massive wastage and huge public, salaries and what have you. So what are you going to do to tame that? That's what has been a blame game out here. So you have told me the scenario as it is.
Thank you,
so
Chair.
What are you going to do if I have to make you the minister for?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I alluded to this earlier, and I said that one of the things is actually to understand where did the rain beat you. The first thing is to make sure that you have stringent measures in terms of containing that. I argued earlier that we need to come up with some concessional funding to actually try to resolve the current constraints. Once you are out of those constraints, then you come down to prioritize which areas, which wastage, for example, what you're really saying, can we cut? And how do we restrict those? How do we create formidable regulations and guidelines in terms of curtailing those wastage? But right now, you have to get out of the problem you are in. I do know that the wage bill is quite high. Then the next thing, what do you need to do with the wage bill? What kind of rationalization measures do you need to do? The promise I am giving you right now is to say that whatever areas that we focus on, we want to make sure that we have sustainable footprint in terms of policy, in terms of actions, in terms of guidelines. That is the only way we can survive to the next decade. We have sustainable guidelines, sustainable frameworks that can be tested over time. And that is the way I was trying to approach it, so that I don't want to specifically talk about any issue, wage bill or all that, but I'm really saying that we need to come up and prioritize. We need to target. But in all those actions, they have to be sustainable. They have to be seen to be sustainable and time-bound. And that is going to be very, very important. Thank you. Then I was going to Mheshimiwa Mishi and the KRA. I think I've talked about that. The Kenyans, we cannot target when you are in such a dire situation, when poverty is biting and cost of living is rising. That is not the time to increase taxes or retarget taxes. That is the time to look at areas where you can provide interventions. So it means that when I talked about the bottom-up approach, I was talking about those areas that you participate in, those markets. We need to regulate them. Most of the time, the poor and in the markets they participate in, it's not because they don't work hard. They work hard, but the market is captured. That elite capture itself diminishes the economic rent that you should otherwise get. And it's an area that we are going to talk about and try to fix. But the other thing I promised and also talked about, when I talked about the digital space, we have worked so well. We have seen that we can use the retail electronic payments platform to actually pay taxes. When it was started, everybody was very happy about it. It removes that personal interaction between the taxman and the taxpayer. And we have seen, even in one of the papers that I've prepared in the last 2-3 years or so, it showed that some of those taxes that uses the payments platform are actually performing much better. The whole issue is to try and see how do we protect that goose that laid the golden egg. That is the main point, and that is the policy of taxation that I came up with. I talked about, please do not raise tax rates to the point where it becomes an inducement for you to evade taxes. That is, you're killing the goose that laid the golden egg, unless you want to say bye-bye to the golden egg. Mheshimiwa Koech, thank you very much about this growing fiscal distress and the debt. Last December, we had a special issue of a journal where we talked about growing with debt. So essentially, it's an area that I'm quite comfortable with. When the HIPIC initiative was started in 1997 by the IMF, the first paper in that book was our paper, and we argued that external debt is a major problem. So we didn't know that domestic debt would also become a major problem. So we are in the same space. We have to look for avenues and solutions to make sure that it works, and that is what we want to make sure that it works. I think Mheshimiwa Bui, the Hasra Fund.
Yes, Mary Emase, Honorable.
Yes, through you, Mr. Speaker, I need to remind the nominee he hasn't addressed my question. I think just to refresh his mind, my question was on the push to enhance contributions for NSSF in view of the prevailing economic situation.
Yeah.
How will it in any way alleviate the situation? What are your thoughts on it? You have not addressed it. Thank you.
Thank you. I was coming to it. Maybe it's the way I wrote my notes.
We'll finish with Mbui, then
Bwana Mbui, let me come to you. And the Hasra Fund is an intervention. The biggest problem with the intervention is that when you make it special that other people cannot join in, it becomes a problem. It is the entry point that we really need to analyze. And especially the targeted market and how you, and this is going to be constructed on the basis that it is targeting specific group of people in different sectors of the economy, and the entry points must be clear and understood. And this is, the biggest problem is that it is not an intervention should not be for everyone, but how do you actually prevent that everyone joins in, or how do you make sure that it works? It is the guidelines that you're going to prevent. And I'm sure once the HASRAFAD and the whole product is developed, you'll see that, and I'm sure you'll have a chance to interrogate it and see how it is going to be done. Declaration, I think I made a mistake. The last part was lumped with the shares in a bank lumped with the other investments. So it's a mistake that it was put as a number on its own. But of course, I wouldn't want to say that there was an error. It is just the numbering that was a mistake. I think we go back, Mheshimiwa, sorry that your question was not missed. The whole issue was how do we look at NSSF? How is it going to save you if it's your future retirement benefits? Some of us in our working life, what we have done is to make sure that we match what the employer has given you, we match it. What you are really doing is to safeguard your future. What we need to do is to come back and start talking, that is consultation, and saying, how much would you be prepared to actually save? So essentially, it's not a punishment, you are saving for the future. And that is something that we can actually deal with and say, what is the optimal level of your sacrifice today to help you in future? The whole issue of savings and raising savings in Africa, and especially in Kenya, is a major debate, because you cannot invest if you have no savings. So the whole issue is to come back to you as a worker and ask, how much are you willing to save now? If your employer is giving you this much, can you match it or even pay more than that? You are safeguarding your future. And that is something that is a democratic choice for most people, but it's also important to make sure that we have an awareness, so that there is no targeting. It's not saying that we need this number. What we actually need is savings. How much do you want to save, and what do you want to save for? And that has been a major issue around us.
Thank you, Professor. I want us to close here, unless there's something really burning. Junet, I'll give you 30 seconds.
1 minute, Chair. Chair, this is a very important issue, because, Chair, if the nominee is approved, now this is one of the ministry that is going to have the highest interaction with Parliament because of the budget making process. And I had asked that question, but it was not answered because of Article 221. And the article says nominee, and this is the same thing that was reminded your predecessors. Rotich, when he came for vetting, he said he's going to engage. This is the longest serving chairman of budget committee now is the majority leader. This has been the biggest problem between Parliament and Treasury, and it has not been resolved. So I want to put it to you whether you will be the one, if you are approved, you are the one who will resolve it. It says the National Assembly shall consider the estimate submitted under Clause 1 together with the estimate submitted by the Parliamentary Service Commission, the Chief Registrar of the Judiciary, and Article 127 and 173. And 4, before the National Assembly considers the estimates of the revenue expenditure, a committee of the Assembly shall discuss and review the estimate review the estimates and make recommendations not to Treasury but to the Assembly. Now what happens normally, Treasury, they go and make their budget estimates and bring it to Parliament. And they want to force Parliament to pass the estimates as they have brought it. And if you don't do it, they go and tell the President. Then the President summons the budget committee and tells them, this is my budget. But the Constitution says the National Assembly should review and submit it to the Assembly. It is if there are things that needs to be changed, then the Assembly will discuss it with the budget committee. Then at the floor of the House, they can agree that this is the budget we are going to pass. This has been a bad practice in our country. But nominee, are you willing to change so that Parliament can have its leeway, its freedom to discuss the budget and pass it within the Assembly?
Yes, majority.
Chair, with your indulgence, maybe just to put in better context what the Honorable Junet is saying, CS nominee. Parliament indeed considers what Junet is saying in line with the Constitution through the BPS. But the main challenge has been deviation from what is passed on as a budget policy statement, because it also includes estimates and ceilings. When you table your annual estimates, it is completely different from what was passed as a budget policy statement. So maybe just to paraphrase what Junet is asking, are you going to commit that what then is agreed on as a budget policy statement, because that is what you commit to and that is what the House passes, that then you will ensure that your annual estimates are in line with that budget policy statement? And it goes along with CS nominee into ensuring that you stick to what you intend to do. Because again, the other big problem we've had is abuse of Article 223 of the Constitution. And I have engaged you in another fora, and you know, where the current National Treasury CS has committed close to 200 billion shillings over and above what has been approved by Parliament without approval of Parliament. Therefore, maybe I should also add that as a question. Are you also committing that in case you are approved, we shall see to an end to the abuse of Article 223? Because it is reserved for things that are of emergency in nature, not to pay for land like the Ruaraka land scandal. Maybe for information, the Ruaraka land scandal emanated from Article 223. It's something that was done especially around this time when there are no committees of Parliament yet set up, just before an election or immediately after an election. Are we going to see an end to that abuse of Article 223?
Sure. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, honourable members, and thank you very much, Mheshimiwa Junet. Let me say this. History is very, very important, because we are told that if you forget your history, you'll be condemned to repeat it. And I'm guided about what has happened in the past and how we can actually have a good start in terms of clarity of issues and also clarity of regulations that are set. I do believe, and I come from that private sector background, and that thinking that once the government sets the right guideline, it gives the private sector periods of policy clarity, and that is what you are really asking for, because once the budget is done in the wrong way, then it affects also the projections by the private sector. But I can see, and you know that we had sleepless nights in our technical committee when we realized the whole of 200 billion, which actually cannot be justified. The whole thing is that it is history that is going to teach us a lesson. We have government led by His Excellency President William Ruto, which is actually saying, look, we have to follow the law. We have to follow the guidelines that we create. And we have to make sure that at the end of the period, we are evaluated on the basis of that. And I think those are the issues that I will follow with strictness, Mheshimiwa Junet and Mheshimiwa Ishongwa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. We shall end here. Mukami, you've missed the boat today. You'll have the first bite in the next, unfortunately. But you had some interventions. Professor, I give you 3 minutes to tell us your final wish to this committee and expectation.
Thank you very much. I would have said that I work with rational expectations. So my first wish was that I do hope that I've made some commitments and even some content that allows you to actually consider my nomination positively. But more importantly, we learn from the past. And we learn from the past, that is adaptive learning. We learn from the past so that it guides us in the future. When you have been beaten in the past, you have to make sure that you correct the situation in the future. I do believe collectively, together with the National Treasury and economic planning, and the parliamentary, because essentially we'll be consulting now and then, we can make a difference in terms of where we are going, and of course make sure that we rectify or live down that bad history. And I do believe that we are going to make a difference. So my prayer is that once I'm nominated, once I'm ratified as or approved by this committee, I'll make sure that I use all avenues, all my strength and I have been there in terms of all my intellectual might, and all consultations necessary so that we all come up with the appropriate rules, appropriate solutions, and appropriate outcomes. I do believe in consultation. I don't think there is any one person who has the monopoly of knowledge. What we do have is consultation that improves the whole spectrum of the issues that we want to cover, our development agenda, and then that will make a difference. Thank you very much for giving me a chance. Thank you very much for listening to me. And thank you very much for, I hope I did answer all your questions, and where I failed, I'm sure we'll meet in some other avenues, and I will make sure that I clarify some of the issues that I had. Thank you very much, and good afternoon.
Very much, Professor. As we release you, you'll liaise with our secretariat. There are 2-3 documents they will require from you to make our record complete. You may take your leave and have a good afternoon. Honorable members, we will
Thank you,
now...
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. As the nominee leaves, it is now 1:20. Break for lunch for 1 hour. We resume at 2:20. 2:20.
Na mtazamaji, huyo amekuwa ni waziri mteule katika Wizara ya Fedha na Mipango, kufika mbele ya kamati ya uteuzi katika zoezi zima la kusailiwa. Yeye ndiye amekuwa wa pili, na imekuwa zoezi ambalo limeweza wanachama wameweza kuuliza maswali mengi. Lakini lililoibuka zaidi hapo, ama jambo ambalo limeonekana kama kumlemea waziri huyu, ni jambo lile la kashfa ile ya Grand Regency, wakati huo akiwa yeye ni